Many learners say English is too fast. They hear words, but they do not understand. That's why today's video is slow English listening. Clear words, short sentences, step by step. And the story? Helen Keller, the girl who found her voice. A young girl who lost her sight and hearing, but discovered the power of words, learning, and courage. Subscribe now. And let's begin the inspiring story of Helen Keller. This is Helen Keller. She was born in 1880. Her home was in Alabama in the United States. Helen was a happy baby. She could see, she could hear. She could say simple words like mama and papa. But when Helen was 19 months old, something terrible happened. She became very sick. The doctors did not know what was wrong. Helen had a high fever. She was hot and weak. Her family was worried. They thought Helen might die. After many days, the fever went away. Helen was alive. Her family was happy. But they soon discovered something sad. The sickness changed Helen's life forever. She could not see anymore. She could not hear anymore. The world became silent and dark. Helen was confused. She could not understand what happened to her. She reached for things but could not find them. She called for her mother but heard no answer. Her parents, Arthur and Kate Keller, loved Helen very much, but they did not know how to help her. They felt helpless and sad. Helen lived in a world without light. She lived in a world without sound. She could only use touch, smell, and taste to understand things around her. She touched her mother's face. She smelled flowers in the garden. She tasted food at dinner. But she could not hear her name. She could not see people's faces. Helen tried to communicate, but it was very difficult. She created simple signs with her hands. She pushed and pulled people to show what she wanted. When Helen wanted milk, she pretended to milk a cow. When Helen wanted bread, she pretended to cut and butter bread. But these signs were not enough. Helen became more and more frustrated. She felt alone in her silent, dark world. Her family loved her, but they could not reach her. Helen could not reach them either. She was lost in silence and darkness. Every day was a struggle. Helen wanted to understand. She wanted to communicate. She wanted to connect with other people. But how could she do this? How could a girl who could not see or hear find her voice? The answer would come, but not yet. Helen had to wait. She had to be patient. She had to be strong. As Helen grew older, life became harder. She was now 6 years old. She was smart, but she could not express her thoughts. Helen felt angry and frustrated. She could not tell people what she wanted. She could not understand what they wanted from her. Sometimes Helen threw tantrums. She kicked and screamed. She threw her food on the floor. She broke dishes and furniture. Her family was scared of Helen's anger. They did not know how to control her. They felt sorry for her, so they gave her everything she wanted. If Helen wanted candy, they gave her candy. If Helen did not want to eat with a spoon, they'd let her eat with her hands. If Helen did not want to wear shoes, she walked barefoot. Helen learned that tantrums worked. When she was angry and violent, people gave her what she wanted. But this did not make Helen happy. She was still trapped in her silent world. She wanted more than candy and freedom. She wanted understanding. She wanted connection. Helen knew other people could communicate. She saw their lips move. She felt their throats vibrate when they spoke. But she could not understand what they were doing. Helen tried to copy them. She moved her lips like her mother. She made sounds with her throat. But nothing happened. No one understood her. Helen became more and more wild. She locked her mother in the pantry. She cut her friend's hair with scissors. She overturned her baby sister's cradle. Her parents were desperate. They loved Helen, but they could not help her. They searched for doctors and teachers. They wrote many letters. Most people said there was no hope for Helen. She is deaf and blind, they said. She cannot learn. She will always be like an animal. But Helen's mother, Kate, never gave up hope. She read a book about another deaf and blind girl who learned to communicate. The girl's name was Laura Bridgman. If Laura could learn, Kate thought, maybe Helen can learn too. Kate wrote a letter to the Perkins Institution for the Blind. This was a school in Boston. They taught blind children. The school sent a reply. They had a young teacher. Her name was Anne Sullivan. Anne was 20 years old. She was almost blind herself, but she could see a little. We will send Anne to your home, they wrote. She will try to teach Helen. Helen's family was excited, but nervous. Would this young teacher be able to help Helen? Would Helen accept her? Time would tell. Change was coming to the Keller house in Alabama. Hope was coming too. It was March 3rd, 1887. Helen was 7 years old. A train arrived at the station in Tuscumbia, Alabama. Anne Sullivan stepped off the train. She was tired from the long journey from Boston. She carried a small bag and big dreams. Anne walked to the Keller house. Helen's family was waiting for her. They shook her hand and welcomed her warmly. "This is Helen," said Kate Keller. Helen felt the vibrations of footsteps. Someone new was in the house. Helen was curious, but also suspicious. Anne knelt down. She reached out to touch Helen. Helen stepped back. She did not trust strangers. Anne was patient. She had studied at the Perkins Institution. She learned from Laura Bridgman's teacher. She knew this work would be difficult. Anne had a plan. She would teach Helen through touch. She would spell words into Helen's hand using finger letters. Each letter had a special position and movement. Anne took Helen's hand. She spelled D-O-L-L into Helen's palm. Then Anne gave Helen a doll. Helen felt the doll. It was soft and smooth, but she did not understand the connection between the finger movements and the toy. Anne tried again. She spelled C-A-K-E and gave Helen a piece of cake. Helen ate the cake happily, but she still did not understand. For days, Anne continued this teaching. She spelled words everywhere they went. In the kitchen, she spelled F-O-O-D. In the garden, she spelled F-L-O-W-E-R. At the table, she spelled A-A-T. Helen learned to copy the finger movements. She could spell many words into Anne's hand, but she thought it was just a game. She did not understand that the finger movements had meaning. Helen was still wild and uncontrolled. She grabbed food from other people's plates. She threw her napkin on the floor. She refused to use a spoon. Anne knew she had to change Helen's behavior first. Helen needed discipline before she could learn. Helen must live with me alone, Anne told Helen's parents, in a small house away from you. She needs to learn new habits. Helen's parents were worried, but they agreed. They loved Helen and wanted her to learn. Anne and Helen moved to a small cottage near the main house. Helen was angry. She missed her family. She threw tantrums and fought with Anne, but Anne was strong and patient. She was firm, but kind. She did not give Helen everything she wanted. She taught Helen to eat properly, to fold her clothes, and to be gentle. Slowly, Helen began to trust Anne. She still did not understand the finger spelling, but she felt that Anne cared about her. Anne never stopped spelling into Helen's hand. Every object had finger letters. Every action had finger letters. Every moment was a lesson. Helen was learning, but she did not know it yet. The miracle was coming soon. It was April 5th, 1887. This day changed Helen's life forever. This day changed the world. Helen and Anne walked to the water pump in the garden. Helen was thirsty. She wanted to drink some water. Anne worked the pump handle. Cool, clear water flowed out. Helen put her hands under the water. She felt the cool liquid on her skin. Anne took Helen's free hand. She began spelling into Helen's palm. W-A-T-E-R. W-A-T-E-R. The water flowed over Helen's hand. Anne kept spelling the same letters. W-A-T-E-R. Suddenly, something amazing happened in Helen's mind. The finger movements in her hand connected to the water on her skin. Helen's face changed. Her eyes grew wide. Her mouth opened in surprise. For the first time in her life, Helen understood. The finger letters meant something. They were the name of the water. Everything had a name. Helen was so excited. She pointed to the ground. Anne spelled G-R-O-U-N-D. Helen pointed to the pump. Anne spelled P-U-M-P. Helen wanted to know the name of everything. She ran around the garden touching flowers, trees, and stones. Anne spelled each name into her hand. Then Helen had another important thought. She pointed to Anne. Anne smiled and spelled teacher. Finally, Helen pointed to herself. Anne spelled the most important word of all. H-E-L-E-N. Helen now knew her own name. She knew she was Helen. She knew Anne was teacher. She knew water was water. Helen was no longer trapped in silence and darkness. She had found the key to communication. That key was language. Helen ran to the house. She wanted to find her mother and father. She had so much to tell them. Helen found her mother in the kitchen. She took her mother's hand and spelled M-O-T-H-E-R. Kate Keller began to cry with joy. Helen found her baby sister. She spelled B-A-B-Y. She found her father and spelled F-A-T-H-E-R. That night, Helen learned 30 new words. She could not stop asking questions. She touched everything and asked for its name. Helen's anger disappeared. Her tantrums stopped. She was no longer frustrated because she could communicate. Anne wrote in her diary that night, Helen's soul was set free today. She discovered that everything has a name. She discovered the joy of learning. Before this day, Helen lived in darkness and silence. She was angry and alone. She could not connect with other people. After this day, Helen's world opened up. She could ask questions. She could share her thoughts. She could learn about everything around her. The miracle at the water pump was the beginning of Helen's new life. She would never stop learning. She would never stop growing. Words became Helen's bridge to the world. Through Anne's patient teaching and Helen's determination, the impossible became possible. From that day forward, Helen Keller was no longer trapped. She was free to explore, to learn, and to become the person she was meant to be. After the miracle at the water pump, Helen could not stop learning. Every day brought new words, new ideas, and new understanding. Anne Sullivan became Helen's constant companion. She spelled into Helen's hand from morning until night. She described everything they saw, heard, and experienced. Helen learned to read. Anne taught her Braille. Braille uses raised dots that blind people can feel with their fingers. Each combination of dots represents a different letter. Helen's fingers moved quickly across the Braille pages. She read stories, poems, and books about history and science. She loved to learn new things. Helen also learned to write. She used a special typewriter. She pressed keys to make letters appear on paper. Now Helen could write letters to friends and family. When Helen was 10 years old, she learned something amazing. She learned to speak with her voice. Anne took Helen to a teacher named Sarah Fuller. Sarah taught deaf people how to speak. She put Helen's hands on her throat and lips. Helen felt the vibrations when Sarah spoke. Helen learned to make the same vibrations with her own voice. It was very difficult, but Helen practiced every day. Helen's first spoken word was, "It is warm." Her family cried with joy when they heard her voice. Helen's education continued. She studied mathematics, geography, French, German, and Latin. She was an excellent student. In 1896, when Helen was 16, she decided to go to college. Most people thought this was impossible. How could a deaf and blind girl study at a university? But Helen was determined. Anne Sullivan went with her everywhere. In every class, Anne spelled the professor's words into Helen's hand. Helen studied at Radcliffe College, one of the best schools in America. She worked harder than most students. She read books in Braille and wrote essays on her typewriter. In 1904, Helen graduated from Radcliffe College. She was the first deaf and blind person to earn a college degree. She graduated with honors. Helen began writing books about her life. Her first book was called The Story of My Life. People around the world read her book. They were inspired by her courage. Helen also became a public speaker. She traveled to many cities and countries. Anne translated her speeches for the audiences. Helen spoke about the rights of disabled people. She believed that all people deserved education, respect, and opportunities. Helen said, "The only thing worse than being blind is having sight, but no vision." She meant that people should dream big and work hard to achieve their goals. Helen met many famous people. She met presidents, kings, and writers. They all admired her intelligence and determination. Helen also helped other blind and deaf people. She raised money for schools and organizations. She wanted every disabled child to have the same opportunities she had. Helen never forgot Anne Sullivan. "Teacher opened the world to me," Helen always said. Anne was Helen's teacher, friend, and companion for almost 50 years. Helen's life proved that disabilities do not have to limit dreams. With determination, good teaching, and hard work, anything is possible. Helen Keller lived a long and meaningful life. She died in 1968 when she was 87 years old, but her influence continues today. Helen showed the world that disabled people can achieve great things. Before Helen, many people believed that blind and deaf people could not learn or contribute to society. Helen proved them wrong. She graduated from college. She wrote 12 books. She traveled to 39 countries. She gave speeches to millions of people. Helen worked with many organizations. She helped create better schools for blind children. She supported research into the causes of blindness and deafness. Helen also fought for other important causes. She believed in equal rights for women. She supported workers' rights. She opposed war and violence. Helen said, "Life is either a daring adventure
or nothing at all. She lived her life as an adventure. She never let her disabilities stop her from pursuing her dreams. Helen's teacher, Anne Sullivan, was always by her side. When Anne died in 1936, Helen was very sad, but she continued her work and her mission. Today, there are many schools, hospitals, and organizations named after Helen Keller. Her childhood home in Alabama is now a museum where people can learn about her life. Helen's story teaches us important lessons. It teaches us that every person has value and potential. It teaches us that good teachers can change lives. It teaches us that determination can overcome any obstacle. Children around the world still read Helen's books. They learn about her courage and perseverance. They discover that they too can achieve their dreams. Helen once wrote, "Keep your face always toward the sunshine, and shadows will fall behind you." This means we should stay positive and focus on hope, not problems. Helen's legacy is not just about overcoming disability. It is about the power of education, the importance of never giving up, and the value of helping others. Helen Keller found her voice through touch, through words, and through determination. She used that voice to speak for people who had no voice of their own. Helen transformed from an angry, isolated child into one of the most respected people in the world. Her journey from darkness to light inspires millions of people. Helen proved that with the right teacher, the right support, and the right attitude, any person can learn, grow, and make a difference in the world. Her message is simple but powerful. Never give up. Keep learning. Help others. Make the world a better place. Helen Keller's voice still speaks to us today. It tells us that every person matters. It tells us that every person can contribute something valuable to the world. This is Helen Keller's greatest gift to humanity. The knowledge that human potential has no limits.
Helen Keller's story shows us the power of determination and good teaching. From silence and darkness, she found her voice and changed the world. This is why we tell these stories. Real people, real courage, real inspiration. The more you listen to English, the more you understand. The more you hear inspiring stories, the stronger you feel. English learning is like Helen's journey. Step by step, word by word, never giving up. Come back every day for another slow English story. Subscribe now. Activate the bell. Like this video. Share it with friends who need inspiration. Until next time, keep learning and keep believing in yourself.